We want to talk about climate and why we need immediate climate action. And we have two scientists who are joining us for this conversation. One is Patricia Nyinguro. She's a climate change scientist and a principal meteorologist at the Kenya Meteorological Department. And then we also have Cromwell Lucarito, who's an agricultural meteorologist at the University of Nairobi. He's also a lecturer and a researcher there. Good morning, Patricia and Cromwell.
Good morning.
Karibuni sana to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a hot seat of the situation. We know when you hear hot, you as a meteorologist, hot could be relative. As guys think hot, and you, oh, the world is getting, I don't know what, warmer, you hotter, there's climate change. We want to discuss all those things and get to understand what that is all about and what climate action is. Now, Patricia, you come from the Kenya Meteorological Department.
Yep.
You know, you people are celebrated in some quarters, and you're completely misunderstood and therefore not celebrated at all in some quarters.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I straddle both sides. Let's start with the celebrated side.
Yeah.
The Kenya Met. Just paint for us the picture of the importance of Kenya Met and the position of Kenya Met in the global system.
So, as the National Meteorological Center, we have the mandate to provide climate information, particularly for early warning. And we do this by providing forecasts at different time scales. So we would provide daily 24-hour forecasts, relatively shorter term, weekly forecasts, seasonal forecasts, which is what most people know us for, which enable like planning for the rainfall season, like what we have now. And we also provide longer term projections, which is in the office which I sit in. So the longer term projections actually support government in developing long-term plans in response to climate change. So basically that's what we have the mandate of doing.
Okay. How do you link with other Mets in the region, in Africa, globally?
Yeah. So all the Mets, in as much as we're part of government, we also under the World Meteorological Organization, which is an organization that, sets the standards of all the Mets and how we operate across the world. So we have standards on observations and how we observe rainfall, temperature, all these parameters, and how we transmit them. And we collaborate also in research and setting standards as well for researchers in using the data that we produce. We also, currently there is a call by the UN SecGen to provide early warning for every human being in the next 5 years. And so that calls for very high collaboration among all the Mets across the world to support capacity, those who have low capacity, technological as well, technological capacity and also financial. So we all work together. Yeah.
Cromwell, you teach people to become meteorologists. Okay. Are there many in this country? And do they work anywhere else apart from Kenya Met?
Right. Thank you very much, Eric. The mandate of the University of Nairobi through the former Department of Meteorology, now in the new dispensation, a meteorology unit under the Department of Earth and Climate Sciences, is indeed a specialized department, special in the sense that it was need-driven. In 1963, when the UNDP, the World Meteorological Organization, saw need to train professional meteorologists across all socioeconomic needs so that they can be able to provide services that will enhance the quality of life, safeguard property, etc. So we are actually a regional training center, and at national level we are also part of the regional training center hosted by the Kenya Met Department. So by extension, the unit that I serve is part and parcel of the government department through the Institute of Meteorological Training and Research. So we come in purely when there are training issues as well as research issues. We train at all levels, from a postgraduate diploma, undergraduate, doctorate. And our products at all levels are first of all meteorologists. But we also align them along specific applications. Agriculture and food systems, water resources, environmental pollution, dynamic meteorology involved with how this air is moving and the clouds are forming and therefore rainfall coming. The forecasters are within our reach, and many other applications, including the biometeorologists who are charged with the responsibility of informing about the interface between climate and health issues.
Okay.
So we are that versatile in terms of capacity development, not just for Kenya, but for the Eastern Central Africa region. We are still getting Southern Africa also sending their students, the northern part of Africa, Western Africa, also bringing their students for us to capacity build.
You know, when you talk about all those things, I hear a lot of it, you know, in terms of, like you said, the patterns, movement of air, cloud formation.
Yes.
Then rain coming. I haven't heard anything about, you know, global warming and the ozone layer and all those other things.
Fine. Part of that training, those become now topics. I just talked about the overview, but those become topics in which, as we are training them about the nature of climate varies in the short term, but it changes in the longer term. Yeah? Longer term meaning beyond a decade to millennia, when we had any shifts away from what we are used to, what we may call a climatic normal, that persists for a decade and beyond, then we categorize that kind of a phenomena as a change. But when we just have some shifts which are short-lived, not getting to excess of a decade, then we say that this climate is within the what? The variability mode. But the driver of these variabilities, notably where we sit, is temperature, where the warming is the one that is a major trigger of the change that everybody is so much aware now today than even the variability I'm talking about. Why? Perhaps because of the adversity of the impact that is associated with that longer term kind of what? A shift from what they are used to.
These shifts that we speak of,
right,
for it to be termed as a shift, it must have patterns.
Yes.
So that
it must have not just a pattern, it must have a threshold. Above or below which we can now be able to categorize. Okay. And that threshold is what I was setting as a decade, 10 years. If we have, say, statistically, I think all of us may have plotted some charts, right? Of whichever economic trend, even pricing, you will see some jumps up and down, fluctuations, isn't it? Yes. Even the climate behaves like that. So you can have a mean pattern, yes, which may point towards either an upward surge or a dip, or it could as well be leveling off.
In this Department of Earth and Climate Sciences,
yes,
do you also include and accommodate traditional earth and climate science, traditional earth and science practitioners?
Like rainmakers and such?
They are called rainmakers, but...
in fact,
yes,
they may be called rainmakers depending on who is actually addressing them. Yes, I think we value a lot the power of indigenous and local knowledge, especially in helping us downscale our focus to some local spots within a particular region. Why? Their knowledge is limited to that area where they have experiences. And the indicators that they may use to say whether it's going to be rainy or not are actually drawn from nature, based on their day-to-day interactions over generations. A skill that they have acquired from generations in the past. So we found that because of the sparsity of our observational network in this country by Kenya Met Department, we at times are unable to pick some unique microclimates. So that local knowledge helps us now to cascade the overview, the upper view of a larger area to now a local scale. Yes? So we actually use them very much in validating the forecast.
How exactly do you use them? I'm going to explain why I'm asking this question.
No problem, we are interacting.
I am thinking of the Kenya Medical Research Institute that has an entire center that focuses on just traditional medicine.
Yes, true.
So, given that rainmakers have played a very, very important role in these services in many communities on this continent, I was just thinking, yes, the very thing you've described, should it also not be given a formal position within, say, a university setting? That's really what I'm asking.
No, that's correct. That's true, and it may not be better placed even at the university. We may need it a lot more at operations through that institute I have actually described. We can actually have it there because their input goes directly to feed into direct application by the users. So at the university, we don't have that outreach issue, right? Unless we channel it through the National Weather Services. So that's the best place to have it. So we proved the integrity of the indigenous and local knowledge through some scientific research, and we found them valuable. But that was at project level. So Patricia can pick up from there. At project, that's where I was very vibrant on this. Then my colleague can pick up because, like I said, KMD and us are one and the same in terms of capacity development.
If I can lead on a question for that, Patricia. So, I mean, obviously, the conversation that we're having today is that climate action and mitigation measures for the environment have come front and center into the conversation. It doesn't matter where you are on the globe. If you're not having a climate action conversation, then you're not relevant. Why now?
Well, I don't think we have to look very far to figure out why now. So currently Kenya is going into a 6th failed rainfall season, and in as much as this region is very known for the high variability in weather patterns, where we have droughts followed by floods as part of normal variability, it's increasing now with climate change. And just touching a bit on what Siti had mentioned, the communities at the local level are observing these changes, and they're not able to cope using the knowledge that they have used for many years because their systems are changing, their climate is changing. What they knew, for example, if you asked anyone, they would tell you rainfall would come on March 15th and by May the rainfall would end. But that has all changed now, so we see either rainfall coming early, coming late, and very fewer rain days. So the impacts of climate change are being observed more and more today and are affecting human systems more. So the conversation is moving towards solutions. What do we do to be able to cope with these changes that we're seeing, and how do we prevent further changes, which is the mitigation conversation. And so at the Met Department, what we do when we produce forecasts, they incorporate the changes that we've seen across the trends, and then we talk to the community. So what is your forecast based on your knowledge that you have collected over the years? And then they tell us what their forecast is, and we try to harmonize the two. So this increases the ownership of the product that they eventually take home, and they are able to act guided by the scientific information we provide and the natural systems that they depend on. So right now is the time to have conversations about climate action in terms of adapting and mitigating.
What's happening? I mean, look, the conversations are everywhere. It doesn't matter what bin you take the cover off of. The conversations are having everywhere. I mean, suddenly it's the rainy season and everybody's planting trees. So there's something that we've seen, right? 6th failed rainfall in Kenya. People are realizing, okay, wait a minute. If we had more cover, then perhaps the consequences of the 6th failed rainfall would not be so dire. All right. So what what have we seen beyond rainfall not being there? Kenya as an example. There are very many other countries where this is happening at the same time. And then what action ought to be taken? Look, we can have the whole conversation about how the global north has contributed a greater percent of the damage, but we now are being asked to do so. We can have that conversation. But the truth of the matter is that where we are, there's a problem, isn't it? So what are we saying has to be done if we're going to save the earth?
So one, already recognizing how we are being impacted is very important, which enables us to plan for how we adapt to these changes. And something that's coming up more and more, particularly for the African continent, is we are being affected by heat extremes more. So when we used to talk about heat waves a couple of years back, it would be a conversation that would be had by people in the north, and it would be common. But now we're seeing, we did a study very recently that we tried to see what are the impacts of extreme heat in Kenya on health. And we found that even though we do not record it a lot, people go to hospital more in hotter months, and the existing diseases are made worse because of the hot conditions. So without that information, then we do not know how to handle it. So one, I feel that research needs to be done more into what the actual impacts are, and this research needs to be recorded so that it's available for everyone. Second, policy planning. So I have the advantage of sitting so I work in science, produce science, but I also have the opportunity to work at the interface of science and policy. So we produce policy briefs off of scientific assessment reports that enable government to be able to plan for the long term. This planning more effort needs to be put in planning with information at hand, and the planning needs to incorporate indigenous information. The planning needs to be led from the local level. So that's something else that I believe strongly needs to be done. And the role of the universities as well is very important in leading this research and enabling us to know how is the future expected to progress. We know we talk about goals globally, but what are the impacts for us at the local level? So the universities, researchers can help us to downscale this information to the local context.
When you have this conversation about climate change and all, well, it's been mainstreamed. Now it's the conversation globally. All these words, climate change, climate action, these are the buzzwords now. If you don't have this and sustainability, if you don't have this in your country, then just move out of Earth and go start base elsewhere. However, like we've seen, like in the Sharm el-Sheikh conversations, it's all talk, and there doesn't seem to be much action that comes out of it. Now, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it's the world's most authoritative climate science body, has been working on these assessments, and of course that's part of the conversation that we want to have today. And you've come up and seen, all right, so number one, it's beyond question that human beings have contributed to the situation we are in today. Number two, it's beyond question that use of fossil fuel has led us to where we are today. And this is using petroleum, coal, and all these other things. Number three, beyond question, we need to do something urgently today. This is not a today conversation. This has been, we were doing COP20 what now, the other day?
27.
Yeah.
Going to 28 next year.
All those COPs have been saying this exactly the same thing. Right? So what is it that, can we localize this conversation? What can Kenya do? What does Kenya need to do?
All right.
and not depending on you
filled
who to bring money here.
Yeah.
What can we do? Let's start with you, Patricia.
Okay, there's a lot that we can do, and I usually like to start at the individual level. Like, do you know what your actions contribute to influencing the environment and influencing the climate? So the report that has just come out showed that one way that we can be able to mitigate climate change is reducing food waste, and that's something each of us can be able to do. Because the more food is wasted, it goes into being dumped, it leads to emissions of methane and all that. So we contribute to the greenhouse gases concentration in the atmosphere. So we can control food waste at an individual level. We can also reduce wasting resources or overconsumption generally. A lot of people buy things that they don't end up using, and the carbon used to produce each of these is very high. So it goes to waste. And on the mitigation side, we can also support planting of trees, which we acts as sinks for carbon, and so we can be able to do that. So, and then at the government level, there are things that we can be able to do without external help. So this report also highlighted the need for proper governance. So if we have proper governance coming all the way, cascading from the top to the bottom in terms of planning, and Kenya is really doing its best because, for example, each county has county integrated development plans, and if you look at most of them, they have climate action in them. So if this can be done by all the counties using the best available science produced by the local producers, then this will enable us to both adapt and mitigate climate change.
How do you coordinate your efforts with other departments, ministries, agencies in communicating this message so that it is actually understood? It's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing for it to be understood, because in the absence of that understanding, whatever you anticipate as being an action that might be undertaken will not be undertaken. And even if it's undertaken, it may be undertaken wrongly.
Yeah. So we are under the Ministry of Environment, the Kenya Met Department, and under them we work together with, for example, the Climate Change Directorate in communicating this. So, for example, when the report of the IPCC Working Group 2 came out, which is largely based on impacts, vulnerability and adaptation, we did an outreach. So we did an outreach, and it was publicized, so it was a webinar, and we invited stakeholders from various sectors. We invited researchers, and I see you smiling, so I anticipate a question. Yeah. And so this enabled us to let the public know what is this report saying and what are the impacts for us. That's one thing. The other thing is we develop policy briefs, and this is mainly for policymakers, for them to use that information for planning. And so the Climate Change Directorate mainly organizes a lot of the outreach that we do. We are also on social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we try to put out information as well from using those channels.
Do you have a communication department within the ministry?
Yes, we do.
What do they do?
I wouldn't want to answer that question for them.
There's a reason why. I actually don't expect. It was a rhetorical question. But the reason why I'm asking it is something that is of such significant importance. The effort that you've made is commendable, but essentially it's a kick-starting of a process. For it to take root and for it to be as effective as you require, there's the continuum. Yeah. That's where now the communication department and my question of what they do comes in, because you started, that's not your job. They pick it up and they go along with it. And so, have they gone along with it?
Well, I think they're doing their best. We're here, aren't we? Having this conversation.
Let's take that break. We'll be back shortly. We are having a climate action conversation, not just climate change. And our guest this morning, Patricia Nyinguro, she's a climate change scientist and principal meteorologist at the Kenya Meteorological Department. And Cromwell Lukorito is an agricultural meteorologist and a lecturer and researcher at the University of Nairobi. Back shortly.
This is the Situation Room. The only way to start your day.
Got the two weather people in the studio teaching us about climate change and climate action and what we need to do. Now, we have heard it very many times. Africa is bearing the brunt of climate change. And then we've also heard it that the industrialized nations have contributed a lot to the situation that we find ourselves in. And then I asked you, Patricia, what can we do? And you said some very basic things that I know sound very easy and simple. First, let's reduce our food waste. Simple things, because food waste contributes to methane, what?
Carbon. Then there'll be footprint.
Let's plant.
You can almost predict what
Let's plant trees.
Yes.
Let's not over consume. I mean, don't just go and buy things that you don't need because the process of buying is basically producing them. But the question is, because every time we talk about this brand that we bear, we look at it from the focus of what others have contributed to doing. Can those efforts, if we took those actions, can they actually reverse what those other people have done to us?
Not reverse, but in the context of the science of climate change, we have a remaining carbon budget to reach a certain warming level of, for example, 1.5 degrees, beyond which the impacts of climate change are just devastating. Catastrophic is the word.
Yeah.
So we have a remaining carbon budget. So if we deplete this carbon budget, then we are getting closer and closer to that level. And so in as much as whatever we are doing may appear to be little, it's a global collaborative effort. So we do our part, and we hope that in good faith, the rest of the world will also do their part. Unfortunately, the history has already taken place. The warming has already happened, and we have enough carbon to sustain warming for a couple of years into the future as well. So what we have to work with is the remaining carbon budget. And a conversation that we had while discussing this release of this IPCC report was the equitable share or equitable use of this remaining carbon budget. We are small economies in Africa, in the global south. We are developing. So we need to emit a little bit more carbon for us to reach a level where we can be able to adapt to even climate change.
Very good.
Yeah, so the conversation has been, should developing countries be allowed equitably to
Allowed by whom?
by global cooperation?
I think we are all governed by a convention.
Yeah. So
The
the
United
Paris
Nations
Agreement,
Framework Convention on Climate Change. That is what binds all the willing parties. Right?
So look, does it really bind?
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Well,
Can I come in just to
I'm
ask a
coming to
question?
that.
It is the word allowed that is bringing all these
Okay.
things.
The convention that came about,
Yeah.
at the time it came about,
Right.
was realized after the conveners had already developed.
Well, it's correct.
So,
And the damage-
and the damage had already been done.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So now they're telling majority of the countries in the global south, actually, you know what, we're all right, but things have gotten really bad. So let's come and have a very happy meeting and tell you guys that actually, you know what, if you do this, you're contributing even more to the detriment of the earth.
Is it really an
Meanwhile,
honest
we've already done.
conversation?
Is that an honest conversation?
No. Let's separate the politics from the science.
Okay.
The two streams come to intersect at some point.
This is scientific politics.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Not political science.
No, not political science. So they come, of course, to intersect at some point.
Right.
But facts be told. The guys whom we are holding to account for the historical emissions, our way developed. Even the material that they use to pollute, of course, are Africa's materials.
Yeah.
The Africa's resources. Right? Why, in the first place, did we allow that? It was our stage of development
Yeah.
that gave them leeway for them to exploit our resources to their advantage.
Okay.
But that does not mean, therefore, even the current talk that we now also should appear like competing with them. Right? Because the atmosphere has no boundary. Boundaries are on the surface of the earth. In the air where climate resides, there are no boundaries. Whatever actions they do, wherever they are hitting us very hard here. So if we can also attempt to compete, then we are putting even ourselves in a more precarious position. Why? Our vulnerability is so deep One, because of our location. One, because of our location. Look at the state of Africa. The only useful or productive portion of Africa is about 1/3 of the continent. Right? So if we are even going to compete with them and accelerate the temperature rise by even 0.1, in an environment where Africa is already experiencing very high temperatures to the level that's almost exceeding the tolerance limits of biological diversity, upon which we depend for food, right? Drying conditions, making water become more scarce, right? That even deepens our vulnerability.
Okay.
So what are you
So
saying?
my take would be that yes, as these guys take care of their historical injustices, which we must hold them accountable, and that's why we are pushing in the UN FCCC process that they honor their pledges so that they can help us to adapt. As even we also undertake mitigation actions, because adaptation plus mitigation is equal to climate
Action.
Sorry, please.
Yes, Ndu, please ask your question.
Ask Cromwell your question.
Cromwell.
Yes.
I understand what you're saying.
Right.
That it was already saying that, look, things are already difficult geographically.
Yes.
Right? We get.
Yes.
I understand.
We come
that.
from that vulnerability.
Now let's park these conveners of this
Yes.
meeting to the side for a
Aside,
moment.
yes. Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Even as much as we're having this conversation, it is impossible to remove them from it as participants in this issue that we are suffering from today. All right. Number one, from an environment perspective,
Yes.
if you have, for example, a dry piece of land, and that it's getting hotter and hotter, are we saying that there is nothing you can do about it to reverse the situation?
No.
Is that what we're saying?
No.
Okay.
We are not saying that.
Okay.
What?
Okay, fine. That's the first question.
Right.
So that you can now explain the
Okay,
entirety.
fine.
Now, number two, are we saying that while you may do something to said piece of land, that you cannot do something else that contributes to development, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's industry, that those two cannot be running simultaneously? Is that what we're saying?
No.
Okay, please.
Right.
I'm sure you understand why I'm asking.
Oh yes, I know.
Because what we are
you are just
hearing-
focusing us now. To
What?
the,
Oh yes, because what we are saying
Yes.
is essentially what we're being asked to do is slow down your development, because look here, you people in the global south, your environment is already gone to the dogs, and if you do anything more,
dare
in terms-
tinker with
if you
it.
dare. If you dare develop any more, you will now burn in proverbial hell, literally, because your temperatures will go through the roof. So choose development or choose hell. And
get
I'm
you.
saying these scientists who've said plant trees and do all these other things to reverse the effects of climate change, you can do the same thing while still developing. That's my argument.
very correct. And that's where I was coming in. When I lay down the equation.
Adaptation plus mitigation,
is equal to climate
action.
Yeah.
Period.
And our
Okay.
priority is adaptation, honestly.
And within that arithmetic, the priority of Kenya
Is
and
adaptation.
its affiliates, Africa, and the other developing countries is what?
Adaptation.
Adaptation. Why? We are saying in this muggy situation, our survival comes first.
What does adaptation mean?
So
Does it mean
Loosely speaking, it is positioning yourself to live with the change.
Okay.
yeah, so we have reduced rainfall.
Yeah.
What do we do with that?
Yeah, what do we do?
reduced rainfall?
There are
In an
things that you can do
environment,
to increase the rainfall.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what
which
I'm
is also
coming to
part
now.
of adaptation.
That's what I'm coming to. That was the basis of that equation.
What I mentioned, because City was asking the question about communication and what. Now, if we're saying that there are ways that you can actually increase your rainfall, there are certain things you can do. How then when we're talking about climate action, then has work started with communities? I'm not talking about this hoity-toity thing where we all go and stay in nice 5-star hotels and travel in one. No, at the community level,
Shamal Sheikh is a
Yes.
good
Nice
international
resort.
resort.
Right.
You know?
at the community level, where we're saying, if you're rolling over your crop, are you planting trees? If you're chopping down trees for charcoal, are you planting 10 more in its place? What is happening at the community level?
Fine. In
For
fact,
me,
I have not tackled your questions.
No, you haven't.
I only was preparing you.
He goes layer by layer.
Preparing you.
My lecturer.
So, one very important thing which we must not miss is to understand our vulnerability. One. Two, our dependencies, which we cannot let go, even in these global negotiations. And three, our livelihoods, especially. You know, we are an agriculture-dependent nation, and by extension, Africa.
Yes.
So when they come in at that global level with the planted trees, we are very cautious about that. Cautious in the sense that the tree planting should never encroach into our agricultural land. Unless we have negotiated a stream we call agroforestry, which we are now steadily getting there, we can't allow that narrative.
We can't just go with plant trees without plant skuma wiki.
Indiscriminately. No. Because we argued even the convention, and they say whatever you do now to manage the temperature goal, you must not do it at the expense of food production. That was the score for the Africa and the least developing countries. So it gives us a platform.
Okay.
So in this vulnerable situation of dwindling rainfall, enhanced droughts, followed by intense floods, deepening Africa's vulnerability, we are saying we can do something with even the water that we have. Like for Kenya, a narrative was crafted which I don't believe in, that water is, Kenya is a water scarce country. I don't subscribe to that.
You and CT both.
I don't subscribe to it at all.
Because it's a management issue. We are not even supposed to be at the level where we are chasing groundwater. It's all about management first of surface water. Which is sweet water. Very good for agriculture production. So you ask me of what we can do. Is indeed having a framework, a master plan to manage our surface water. How do we manage it? Harvest it, distribute it across the country.
Hivo too.
We can go and sleep.
Okay. Why is that not being done?
Well, now we are coming.
Okay.
It's one of the climate actions. It requires 3 pillars of implementation. Right? We require finances. Right? We require appropriate technologies. We require knowledge capacities, the human resources.
Okay.
And governance, I think.
Yes,
And
and governance. I don't want to mob capacities in governance. Let's isolate it because it plays a key role.
You taught her well. She's remembered.
Masomo vizuri. Sio tu kupitia, hapana, kwa kusikiza kwa makini.
These ones were taught well.
Governance.
Okay.
Right? So this calls for, therefore, an appropriate policy which cannot be done by a university. A university where I work can only do a policy brief, hoping it is going to touch the heart of the policy process.
Implementation.
Yes. Because we can talk about, yes, let us irrigate. Will you irrigate with air?
Actually, you could. Because
Well,
It may not use any results.
no.
Get water from
I
air.
mean it seriously. Because if you look at the sort of technology that Israel, which is really a desert, have come about, they have actually produced water from air, literally.
Of course, but it's processed air to generate
That is
water.
it.
But I'm saying air as
can't
raw
just do it as raw.
is today. Are you going to irrigate with it?
You
The
can't.
answer is no.
So, but Mwalimu, as we speed up the conversation,
Right.
I think the argument, and that's where Ndu was very strong, is the second bit.
Yes.
The technology.
The technology.
Who currently owns the technology?
The technology
those people who-
is owned by the West.
Bas.
I was coming to that. It's
So,
owned by the West.
Can
these
we develop
guys,
our
it's
own
like
technology?
Have muzzle you, right? And that's why they can bully us around with their wishes.
with their own stories.
So the question is, why are we not innovating?
Yes.
Why aren't we crafting appropriate technologies to our context?
But Prof, I think we are. I think we
I'm
do.
asking that question
Yeah.
as a thought-provoking issue. Because if we have those technologies in place, then why have we not
Deployed
deployed
them.
them?
You know, I think they're even being deployed, if you ask me, because
Yes, let me ask you.
when you talk about technology, you are talking about water harvesting. What do you need to have a water pan? This advanced technology, what do you need to be able to lace the surface so that you can retain the water? What's this big thing you need?
Well, you can have the water there in that pan, but is that sufficient?
But it's a start.
Yeah.
What I'm
It's a
saying-
heavy investment. How about the use?
You know the reason why I'm
You
going
must
with-
think of it in a stringed form
All the way until
All
the
the way.
Sukuma Wiki.
until the Sukuma Wiki.
You know, the reason why I'm asking, the reason I'm making this statement is because when you focus on advanced technology, you actually forget certain fundamental, basic, ordinary technologies that actually work and which can serve a purpose even as you think of those so-called advanced technologies.
That's correct.
Because you focus on advanced technology, you ignore what can be done. On a
No,
daily
we are not
basis.
focusing on advanced. We only want to be first enabled to have now your local and the traditional knowledge. This knowledge is with the people. We want to enhance those ones. Me, I'm always against introductions of new technologies from whichever the place. Let us enhance
The ones that we
the
have.
ones that we have.
Patricia, do we have those basic technologies that I
Yes.
see you nodding every
Yeah,
time?
we do. And I think it comes back to a bit of what we discussed.
Yeah.
The adaptation efforts being practiced on Africa are incremental and are very disaggregated and fragmented, but the solutions are there. So in if we have proper governance, that we are able to harmonize all these efforts, and indigenous communities or local knowledge is used to, for example, a certain area would harvest by water by digging and then putting paper, and that's enough for them. Another community would do it differently, but we are not harnessing all this information to come up with something that can enable us to implement this adaptation, because it is an adaptation response all the way from the national to the local level. So it came out very clearly from the IPCC report that our efforts are fragmented and they are not, they are also incremental. So it's just we are dealing with the problem immediately it appears. But if we can be able to plan with the available science and use local knowledge from the national level all the way to the local level, we are able to cope with this.
Let me ask you, can the local knowledge and those local mechanisms be scaled?
Yes, they can be scaled appropriately. So there are regions where some technology will not work because of the environment. So having knowledge of that, auditing our environment is a first step. So knowing what response measures will work in what region is a first step. But they can be scaled up to at least a certain level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do we need then from others? We don't need anything from anybody else.
We absolutely need a lot from them, and it's
Okay.
from the point of view of holding them accountable for historical emissions. But we can also use whatever we have already to start this
It
conversation.
always sounds like, okay, and that was a conversation in Sharm el-Sheikh, reparations.
Yeah.
Does it come to that?
Yeah, it kind
Do
of
they
does.
need to
and
pay us?
they need
Or
to,
they have
because
like-
How long
caused
that
us.
conversation is,
Yeah.
and how long it will take to actually actualize.
we're having
Personally, I find that we.
progress.
Sorry, Patricia. I find that we seem to be wearing ourselves out because of that push as Africa. At times, I think a bit weirdly, but I have always not regretted, because unless we think differently, we are not going to liberate Africa. As we push, yes, for that CBDR, a common but differentiated responsibility issues, let us be doing something at home and doing it differently from even our own resources. You want to tell me, Sid, Eric, and
Ndu.
Yes. 2 weeks down the line, I have arrived this morning from Western Kenya. You will be reporting flooding.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
You'll be reporting what?
Flooding.
Can we manage that excess flows in our river channels?
We
can. And that's
Bring
a
it
good
to the
point to end
Maus or the
conversation
Timboroas,
at.
which are the highest grounds in this country, apart from the mountains. And that water can use the natural channels
Into our farms.
to get into every corner of this country. So the narrative of people telling me every day, I'm almost getting tired listening to these old tales. Oh, we don't have resources, we don't have what? Can we start small with what we have?
We end it there.
The losses we had in
Cromwell,
Northeastern the other day.
Thank you. Imagine our time is up. Just when we were starting.
I know.
Just when we were starting.
I didn't know how long because we have not gotten to the core.
Imagine.
This is
You'll
so that
come
you can
back.
come back again.
You see?
Yes.
Gladly.
That's
Well,
it.
as I just sum up, Eric, we had myriad losses and we are still undergoing losses on something we can do. Yes? As a country. We have solutions at our fingertips.
We have everything. We have
Let's not
everything.
be this Baker mentality. I think we must just come out of it.
But they should pay their
To-
money.
but they should.
For them, they should pay. The historical injustice to me, we pursue it. But let not all our energy be on that one.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's be doing something and doing it differently.
Okay. Thank you very much. Cromwell Lucorito is an agricultural meteorologist. He is also a lecturer and researcher at the University of Nairobi. And Patricia Nyinguro is a principal meteorologist at the Kenya Met Department. She is a climate change scientist. Thank you very much for joining us today. That
you
conversation,
for
when
having us.
you
Thank
come,
you very much.
come again.
We're looking forward.
No, we are looking forward because we have not gone to the next phase. We have just been at the introductory level.
We've just
because
touched the surface.
We need to discuss this science issue very deeply because it's that capacity that's lacking.
That's true. That's true. You're passionate about it.